dice, then just compromise. It's the chance of your life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to save. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life. Without any thought, I keep moving on. I don't even care if my soul is gone. So many words that I should have said. Not concerned about how to live instead. Just open your eyes and take my advice. Stop rolling the dice and just compromise. It's the chance of your life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to save. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life. Nothing in life is good. Tied in with feel better on the weekend. Give my life a better meaning. Let me stay where I'm in phase. I feel better on the weekend. I feel better on the weekend. Give my life a better meaning. Let me stay where I'm in phase. I feel better on the
Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Hey, happy Monday. I'm your host, John Good. This is Cyber Threat Intel, and this is episode number 25. It is Monday, April 29th, 2024. Glad to have you. 25 episodes. Can't believe it. We are almost to 100, quarter of the way there. So if you're joining for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're watching on the replay, or if you're joining live, or if you're listening on a podcast, doesn't matter. Welcome. If you're returning, welcome. Glad to have you back. Glad to see you back in the community, back watching the content. So another great week here. But if this is the first time that you're joining, one of the things that we typically do with these streams is we give people a few minutes to hop on while we go through some show notes and talk about a few things to kick off the show. And if you need a snack or a drink or anything like that, go grab it so you can get through the episode. And then when we kick off the content, we'll be right into it. So there will be a brief after show after this episode. So we will be sticking around a little bit after the show. We don't always do that for episodes, but we do them for, we do it for some episodes to answer your questions and things like that. So if you're looking to stick around for the after show, make sure you do that too. Now, how you can find the show. I briefly mentioned this a little bit when I was talking earlier about being new. But there's several different ways that you can watch the show and get the content, right? First of all, live stream. We're always going to be doing live streams and putting the content onto YouTube. So if you're on the John Good Cyber YouTube channel, you can see it all there. You can join the live stream, interact, chat, all those awesome things. This episode is also being streamed to Facebook, Twitter or X, and LinkedIn, all under the John Good Cyber profiles. So look for the John Good Cyber profiles on Twitter and X and LinkedIn, and then the John Good Cyber page on Facebook, and you can find us on there as well. If you'd rather listen to audio format, maybe you're a podcast fan, then you can go to your favorite podcasting platform, Spotify, iTunes, whatever, right? There's a whole bunch of them. Just search for Cyber Threat Intel and we'll come right up and you can listen and follow us there. If you go to the website, cyberthreatintel.com, so cyberthreatintel.com, you can find all the platforms that we're on there. They're all directly linked, so you can easily get to them by doing that. And if you go to the website, you can also access the article feed. So the article feed is all the articles that we cover throughout the episodes, as well as some other articles that we don't necessarily have time for or don't necessarily touch on or get to. But we put them in that feed anyways. We have highlights and sometimes notes and all kinds of stuff like that in these articles. So definitely worth checking out and tracking the information if you prefer to read it or read more into what we talked about, right? So really important. Now, if you have professional certifications, CISSP, Security Plus, something like that, that requires ongoing education, right? Continuing education. Maybe you have to get credits for training or webinars, things like that. Well, you can claim these shows for half a CPE towards those certifications and maintaining those. So definitely make sure you do that per week. That's 2 CPEs because we do Monday through Thursday, stream each day, and then that gives you 2 per week. So it can be very easy to get all of your credits just by watching the show and tuning in and maintaining and getting that free credit. So definitely make sure that you do that. Again, it's free, so take advantage of that. Don't wait till the very last moment of the year to try to get all your credits in. That can be a disaster. That's a huge mistake to wait that long and to not cash in early. So just get the credit all the time for these shows every day when you're watching them, and you'll be able to do that. Now, one key thing with that is that some of these certification providers, they do want to see evidence that you actually registered or showed up for the stream. So with that being said, and I've said this before, make sure that you comment your name, your actual name, whatever's on your certification, in the chat, because the chat is displayed on the screen, and then that way you can actually get credit for being here. And if you get audited, then even more so, right? You can go back and you can point to that, take a screenshot, and show that evidence. So make sure you do that. Please don't get audited and have nothing to prove anything, right? And then miss out on that value. Please, please, please do that. Now, with that being said, there are some people still hopping onto the live stream, so we'll give people a few more minutes here. And while we do that, we'll take a second to talk about our sponsor for this episode, Cyber Training Pro, and I will see you on the other side. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. There's so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. All right, thanks to Cybertraining Pro. We love our sponsors. Sponsors help make all this content possible for you, especially for free, right? Because Cyber Threat Intel is a free show and free content for you, and they help make that possible. So we always like to show love for our sponsors. We highly recommend that you go check out our sponsors and show them some love as well and show your support for what they're doing to make sure all this stuff happens. So very, very important. Now, if you're a company and you're looking to sponsor content, check out the description because there is more information about how you can kick off that conversation and actually sponsor content. So definitely do that if you're a business. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop on over to my screen here and we will get into the first episode or the first article here. All right. So first article, American Airlines keeps mistaking 101-year-old passenger for baby. And this is the lady here. A 101-year-old woman keeps getting mistaken for a baby because of an error with an airline's booking system. The problem occurs because American Airlines systems apparently cannot compute that Patricia, who did not want to share her surname, so her last name, was born in 1922 rather than 2022. Now, there's a quote here. It says, "It was funny that they thought I was only a little child and that I'm an old lady," she said. The glitch the BBC witnessed happened when Patricia was flying between Chicago and Marquette, Michigan, a flight this reporter was also traveling on. It also says, but it appears the computer system is unable to process a birthday so far in the past, so it defaulted to 100 years later instead. The former nurse who flies every year to see family and escape the cold winters says on both occasions, staff at American Airlines were kind and helpful in spite of the confusion. Another quote here, "I have some trouble with my eyesight now, so I wouldn't want to do this on my own," she said. But she's adamant the IT problems will not put her off flying, and she says she's looking forward to her next flight in the autumn. So obviously this is kind of a unique situation, right? But I think one of the things that we have to really think about as far as using technology is the integrity of our data, the accuracy of our data, right? When we're looking at things like cybersecurity, the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, those things, right, that you may have heard about are really important. And when it comes to data, we need that data to be accurate, especially when things like decision-making are being done. In this case, when a customer is being linked to a certain birthday or identifier, that is really important. Now, one of the things that you may or may not be aware of, depending on your age, because if you were born after the year 2000, you probably don't know about this, but in around the year 2000, kind of going from 1999 to 2000, there was this huge issue with computers and their ability to basically go to the year 2000, right? Kind of restarting. It was this huge thing where everybody was extremely concerned with computers basically malfunctioning or crashing, and all related to this year issue. And it ended up not being that big of a deal, right? The whole world did not collapse. We're still here, right? So that's good. But this is kind of along those same lines, right? especially in today's world, right? With today's technology and how well it works, this is kind of crazy that you can't account for this 1922 to 2022 thing, right? This whole year thing that shouldn't be an issue anymore, but apparently still is, right? But if you have issues like this in any kind of data, right? Financial data, customer data, just think about even the user experience from this point of view, right? And this is kind of a security thing, but also kind of just a general business practice. You have a customer here who keeps having this same issue and really is causing, probably a bunch of issues for her, inconveniences, having to prove who she is, or when she shows up to the airline and it's all of a sudden, like she said, an old lady instead of a baby. That's kind of different, right? And especially with air travel and how many restrictions and security and all of those kinds of things are in place, that's a system that needs to kind of work, right? We need it to kind of be accurate and not allow these wrong dates, right? Wrong dates. So, and Alexis, Julian says it was called Y2K for those who may want to look into it more and not know about it. Yeah, I mean, it was, it was an interesting time, but certainly if you were born after 2000, you probably don't know anything about it. But I would go check it out because it was a very interesting time. There's probably a lot of interesting documentaries that kind of go into it and explain, what people were thinking at the time, what ended up happening, right? And so certainly very interesting. Thank you for that, Alexis.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, next article here. Bogus NPM packages used to trick software developers into installing malware.
No!
An ongoing social engineering campaign is targeting software developers with bogus NPM packages under the guise of a job interview to trick them into downloading a Python backdoor. Doesn't sound so good, right? Cybersecurity firm Secure Onyx is tracking the activity under the name dev #Popper, linking it to North Korean threat actors. There's a quote here: during these fraudulent interviews, the developers are often asked to perform tasks that involve downloading and running software from sources that appear legitimate, such as GitHub. Security researchers Den Izuvuke, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, probably not, Tim Peck and Oleg Koloniskov said the software contained a malicious Node.js payload that once executed compromises the developer's system. Details of the campaign first emerged in November 2023. Then it says, then earlier this February, software supply chain security firm Phylum uncovered a set of malicious packages on the NPM registry that delivered the same malware families to siphon sensitive information from compromised developer systems. It also says the attack chain detailed by SecureOnyx started with a zip archive hosted on GitHub that's likely sent to the target as part of the interview. The implant, besides gathering information, is capable of command execution, file enumeration and exfiltration, and clipboard and keystroke logging. So pretty standard kind of malware, right? But pretty powerful. So this is really interesting, right? Not only do we see North Korea as a perfect example going after companies as a potential candidate or a potential employee, because that's been very common. We've talked about that even on this show before, and I've definitely talked about it on the channel before. But now we're also seeing them go after job seekers. So people that are trying to find jobs, and they're just compromising their systems, which I'm sure, maybe can give them access to different software or information on that person's computer if that person is currently working for a company maybe that they're interested in. That's certainly a good way to get some information. Or if they start connecting to other companies or interacting with other companies, right? The possibility is really endless once they get those developer systems compromised. And we've seen a lot of issues lately kind of related to GitHub. Now, this is not a GitHub, directly a GitHub problem, right? That GitHub is somehow causing. It's just the delivery mechanism, I guess you could say, that's being used. So definitely interesting. I'm interested to see how this kind of plays out and how successful they are overall, right? You would think that developers in a lot of cases won't just download random software, but I mean, you'd probably be wrong, right? You'd be wrong. There's a lot of developers that will download software, especially when it comes from places like GitHub, right? They're kind of quick to get it. They want to see what's in it. They want to use it, whatever, right? So interesting article though. Next article, Russian linked APT28 used tool Goose Egg to exploit WinBug. Microsoft reported that the Russian linked APT28 group, aka Forest Blizzard, Fancy Bear, or Strontium, used a previously unknown tool dubbed Goose Egg to exploit the Windows print spooler flaw CVE 2022-38028. Since at least June 2020 and possibly earlier, the cyber espionage group has used the tool Goose Egg to exploit the CVE previously mentioned. This tool modifies a JavaScript constraints file and executes it with system-level privileges. That is always dangerous when anything is executing with system-level privileges, right? One of the things that this kind of brings to mind for me is when we're talking about even things like running applications or setting up services within companies, right? One of the very common things that you will see if you don't closely regulate your IT teams is that if a service account is required, it is very common for them to give it admin or system level privileges, or an application set it up with system level privileges, because it's easier, right? Because it's easier than doing it the correct way and limiting those privileges or identifying those privileges. And then you'll get several years down the road potentially. And then now all of a sudden you've really got to do the legwork and figure out what that actually needs and start removing permissions. When you have to remove permissions, let me give you a lesson here. When you have to remove permissions, it is a lot more difficult than if you start out by not giving them. I'm telling you right now, I've lived that life several times, and taking away is so much more painful than just not giving it from the start. Elite says, we all tend to form habits of trust. GitHub, retailers, apps, it's only human. That is true. That is true. There's a lot of, people tend to let their guard down if they have trusted something for a while, or they've kind of built up rapport and trust. And that's kind of where we get into trouble too, right? That's why social engineering is extremely successful, because the best social engineers can build trust. They can build rapport with people. And then all of a sudden people let their guard down, and then all of a sudden now they're in, right? That's a long discussion for sure, but definitely a valid point, right? Okay, so back to the article here. Don't install your applications with system level privileges, please. Cyber Warrior says, finally got home in time to watch Cyber Threat Intel. All right, welcome.
Yes.
Back to the article here. While Goose Egg is a simple launcher application, threat actors can use it to execute other applications specified at the command line with elevated privileges. And this is another reason why that system level access is a bad idea. The vulnerability CVE 2022-38028 was reported by the U.S. National Security Agency, so the NSA, and Microsoft addressed it with the release of Microsoft October 2022 Patch Tuesday. All right, our favorite day, Patch Tuesday, security updates. Goose Egg is usually deployed with a batch script. Pretty common, right? We've seen this with a lot of different exploits and vulnerabilities, commonly named execute.bat, very creative name, or doit.bat. It's always interesting to see some of these things, right? This script creates a file named servetask.bat, so another batch file, which includes commands for saving or compressing registry hives. The batch script then executes the Goose Egg executable and establishes persistence by scheduling a task that runs servetask.bat. So servetask.bat probably opens up some ports or something, right? Calls back something. That's typical. Let's see here. And then there's just a little bit more about the article. Yeah, I mean, so this is pretty standard kind of stuff, right? But again, this is where people get into trouble when they're installing software or doing things with system level privileges. A lot of things can be prevented or minimized as far as the risk if you use appropriate permissions and appropriately restrict access and what things are able to do, right? Especially service accounts, administrators, right? I'm telling you again, right? What are the default things that you will see if you're not working in this career field already, or if you're already working in this career field, you've probably seen it. The default reaction, especially from a lot of IT professionals, is to give, admin access, give wildcard access, right? So if it's like a wildcard, it's anything. That's how we kind of phrase that. But that is absolutely a default by a lot of professionals, and that is so dangerous. But especially, if your resources are limited, right? Maybe you have one IT staff member, something like that, where there's only a limited amount of people, then it's definitely really common. But you'll see that in larger organizations too, where they have a staff and they're just like, no, I'm I'll give it, blanket access, and we could just figure it out later. We can figure it out later. Famous last words, right? But again, taking away privileges is always harder and more difficult than just not giving them in the first place. So if you're in that situation, always do the legwork up front to get it right, or to try to get it as right as possible, and then deal with, the aftermath of that, instead of just saying, yes, go ahead, admin access, good to go, we'll figure it out later, right? There's always going to be a worse situation. All right, next article here. Hackers may have accessed thousands of accounts on California's state welfare platform. No! That deserves that. Threat actors breached over 19,000 online accounts on a California state platform dedicated to welfare programs. Officials reported that the security breach occurred on February 9 when someone logged into some Benefits Cal users' accounts. Threat actors exploited reused passwords obtained from third-party websites. Benefits Cal, a California-based web platform, enables users to apply for and oversee a range of welfare programs encompassing food stamps, cash assistance, and medical benefits. So if you don't know what welfare is, essentially it's people that are struggling, right, that need some kind of assistance here in the U.S., and it's a system built to essentially help people in that situation. According to the date breach notification, I'm sure that should say data breach notification, potentially compromised information may have included username, address, date of birth, full or last 4 digits of social security number, email address, phone number, EBT card number, which is their food stamps card, right? Their like credit card, preloaded card, case number, Medi-Cal ID number, and information about their program eligibility and benefits. In response to the incident, the agency deactivated accounts and launched an investigation that revealed attackers had access from March 1st, 2023 and February 13, 2024. So basically just under a year, right? A couple weeks under a year. California state welfare platforms also implemented additional security measures to protect the accounts, including enabling two-factor authentication, and users are recommended to use strong passwords and avoid reusing the same credentials from multiple websites. So how many times have we seen accounts get compromised due to password reuse, right? We see it all the time. It's crazy. And then we know that passwords are a vulnerable control, right? They are vulnerable to being exploited or hacked. And then we don't always have things like two-factor authentication enabled by default or forcing users upon registering to actually set it up, right? So even if you have the ability to do two-factor authentication, if you don't force users to do it, you're going to have a group that's going to do it, that's kind of security conscious or thinks it's a good idea. And then you have a group that thinks it's a roadblock or a hurdle to them getting in their account or one extra thing that they have to do, right? You're giving them the choice of what they should do. We know that two-factor authentication is something that is basically mandatory now, even if it's not officially mandatory, but it's basically mandatory for every single user account that exists, right? If you're developing an application, you better build in two-factor authentication and at minimum, at least give the administrator the right to enforce or require users to set up multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication upon registering or creating an account. I can't believe how many applications are being developed and that are out there that either one, don't have two-factor authentication, which, that's a slap bad on you, right? That is terrible. Or, so if you don't have it at all, you're not requiring users to do it, right? Or you don't have the option as an administrator to force users to do it. Now, you could get into all kinds of discussions as far as like what kinds of users should you force to do it? Should you force all users to do it? Should you force just administrator accounts to do it? That's a long discussion that we're not going to have on this show or this episode right now. But in the grand scheme of things, you should just require all users to have multi-factor authentication, or at least give the administrators the option to flip that switch, and then all users are required to do it. I just cannot believe that we're still living in a world where it's not the default, right? When I log into an application and it forces me to set up multi-factor authentication, like right from the jump, I applaud them, right? Yes, very good, very good. And, there's very few of those applications that actually do that. So, and Jetsui, looks like you have a question. Hold on to that question for the after show because there is going to be an after show, and you may have to ask it again just in case it gets buried in the chat. But we're going to have an after show where we're going to answer questions. So stick around for that after the content. Alexis says, without some authoritative hand to force MFA implementation, there will always be organizations that don't implement it. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the fact that it needs to be, regulated, right? Like some kind of law or something put into place where you actually need it. You just need a good security culture where the people that are in charge of setting the strategy or in charge of the technology or in charge of the company support that decision, right? If they support it, that can make a lot of stuff happen, internally, or if you're developing applications, developing that into the application, right? Like baking that into the application. So it's not something really that needs to go to a law or anything like that. We just need more people that are supportive of security and that actually support it. So they kind of walk the walk and talk the talk, right? They're not just like, oh yeah, we support it. Like, So, Xelite says, I wonder more, when will people generally expect MFA? I mean, most people expect to lock their front door. Yeah, I mean, I think we are, more and more people are starting to enable it by default in a lot of applications and services and things, especially the more technology focused people, right? But I mean, there's still several, kind of generations of people that kind of have to be educated. So it's probably going to be a little bit, right? We've got to get everybody on this technology train and really trained that they need multi-factor authentication. So, all right, next article here. Okta warns of unprecedented credential stuffing attacks on customers. Have you heard about this? This has been in the news quite a bit. Okta warns of an unprecedented spike in credential stuffing attacks targeted at its identity and access management solutions, with some customer accounts breached in the attacks. Threat actors use credential stuffing to compromise user accounts by trying out in an automated manner lists of usernames and passwords typically purchased from cyber criminals. Right? We've seen this attack lately, and just in general, it's a pretty common kind of attack. It says in all attacks that Okta observed, the request came through the Tor anonymization network in various residential proxies, for example, NSOX, Luminati, and Data Impulse. So if you don't know how Tor works and you're in this career field or you want to get in this career field, highly recommend that you check it out. But essentially, kind of at the very simplest definition of it, you log into a server, right? And then that server kind of distributes your traffic and kind of obfuscates it, it's called, but kind of disguises that traffic so that when it gets to the end destination, you can't tell where it actually came from, right? Like that is a very simple definition of how the Tor network works. There's a whole lot more to it, and definitely recommend researching it more if you're interested in it. But a lot of attackers do use that, again, to obfuscate or to kind of camouflage their attack and who they actually are. So this affecting Okta, obviously speaking of multi-factor authentication, right, and SSO, this is kind of a serious deal. Okta says the observed attacks were particularly successful against organizations running on the Okta Classic engine with Threat Insight configured in audit-only mode rather than log and enforce mode. So this mode is actually an important discussion here, right? You will see this, give me all kind of options here. You will see this in different applications, different services, all kinds of different things, right? So you'll see, for instance, an audit-only mode, which can be used to kind of test things out. And then you can see if certain configurations or things that you've done, if they would actually work, or if they would be restricted or blocked or allowed or whatever, right? Like it's kind of a test mode. So it will alert, it just doesn't stop anything, okay? When you start doing like a log and enforce mode, or there's all kinds of different names that it could be, but the idea with that kind of mode is that instead of just running your rules and kind of generating an alert, this is actually going to do whatever you have it set up to do, right? So if you have it set up to block certain traffic in audit only mode, then it's going to generate alerts, say, hey, we detected this traffic. It would have been blocked, right? Log and enforce mode. Hey, block this traffic. Okay, I identified that traffic. Okay, I blocked that traffic, right? And then it will generate an alert as well. So that's kind of the difference between those two. And it's important to know that, because even if you don't deal with Okta, other applications, other software technologies, tools have this kind of capability in them. And so you need to know the difference when you start getting in there to test different things. Back to the article here. Likewise, organizations that do not deny access from anonymizing proxies also saw a higher attack success rate. The attacks were successful for a small percentage of customers, Okta said. So if they weren't blocking, for instance, Tor, right, that's an anonymizing proxy, then the attackers have a higher success rate. Seems pretty logical, right? Company provides a set of actions that can block these attacks at the edge of the networks. So if you're dealing with Okta, if you're interested in this article or what this is talking about, then definitely look at these and you can see more about it. But basically, enabling threat insight and log and enforce mode, right? Just like we talked about, deny access from anonymizing proxies, okay? Switching to Okta Identity Engine, and then implementing dynamic zones to specifically block or allow certain IP addresses and manage geolocation and some other stuff. So that's basically what it says. And they give a little bit more in here too. It also says Okta also provides in its advisory a list of more generic recommendations that can help mitigate the risk of account takeover. These include passwordless authentication, which is definitely popping up more and more these days, kind of a buzzword, if you will. Enforcing multi-factor authentication, MFA, two-factor authentication. Remember, we just talked about this. using strong passwords, denying requests outside the company's locations, blocking IP addresses of repute, so reputation, bad reputation, monitor and respond to anomalous sign-ins. So if there's some kind of sign-in that doesn't seem to jive, maybe it's from a weird IP address or some other country than your employees typically work in, right? That could be a reason why. Just like when you log into like Facebook or something, and if you're logging in from a different computer or a different IP address, it's going to prompt you or ask you for another to confirm via another method, via email or the app or whatever, right? Same kind of idea. So this is a very realistic thing. Okta affects a lot of organizations. So if you're dealing with Okta, highly recommend that you're aware of this. From a general standpoint, depending on if you're looking for jobs or anything like that, knowing about software like this that is very widespread and kind of some recent events, some recent things that have happened with that software or service will do you very well, right? That will show your continued interest in this career field because you're learning about things, not just everything really. I mean, everything that we're talking about is important. But again, specialized technologies and things that are very widespread are definitely the ones that a lot of people are going to know about. So if you talk about them, then it kind of creates that common bond of knowledge. So that's just kind of a side note, but definitely important. Next article here, targeted operation against Ukraine exploited 7-year-old MS bug, Office bug. And then it gives kind of this diagram here, starting from Signal. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Security experts at Deep Instinct Threat Lab have uncovered a target campaign against Ukraine, exploiting a Microsoft Office vulnerability dating back almost 7 years to deploy Cobalt Strike on compromised systems. Researchers found a malicious PPSX, or PowerPoint slideshow, Signal 2023-12-20-160512.ppsx file uploaded from Ukraine to VirusTotal at the end of 2023. The file, although labeled as shared through the Signal app, might not have been originally sent via the application. It's a PPSX file, seemingly an outdated U.S. Army manual for tank mining clearing blades, MCB. The PPSX file contains a remote link to an external OLE object. And if you don't know what VirusTotal is, I highly recommend you research that just so you're aware of how that works and what that software actually does, how you can upload malware and all kinds of things to look for, common patterns and signatures and all those kinds of things. Very, very valuable kind of tool. Definitely worth checking out. Back to the article here. The true hosting behind the domain was identified as a Russian VPS provider. So this is of the OLE object. Second stage, remember, we've talked about this before, malware operates in stages, right? Very, very seldom does a piece of malware execute everything. A lot of times it's obfuscated or attempted to camouflage itself by doing a piece here, something here, a step here, right? Like all these different stages of an attack to hide itself so you don't detect it when you're looking through the logs. Second stage dropper is an HTML file containing JavaScript code executed via Windows cscript.exe. The script sets up persistence, pretty common, decode, and saves the embedded payload to disk disguised as Cisco AnyConnect VPN file. So Cisco AnyConnect, right? Pretty standard kind of software. Probably not going to raise an alarm. The payload includes a dynamic link library, so a DLL, VPN.settings that injects the post-exploitation tool Cobalt Strike beacon into memory and awaits commands from the C2 server. Threat actors use a cracked version of Cobalt Strike. So if you don't know what a command and control server is, a C2 server, essentially you have these end user systems or agents that are waiting for commands, for directions from the server, and some attacker controls that server, and they send out the commands to all of these different agents or zombies or bots, whatever you want to call them, right? and then they start executing those commands or running those commands. Pretty standard stuff as far as an attack chain, right? All right, that's good for that article. Next article, DHS announces AI safety board with OpenAI founder, CEOs of Microsoft, NVIDIA, and IBM. Hey, Kyle. Kyle says, hey, John, glad to be here. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Welcome. Says, real quick, it's nice to have a strong knowledge of potential employees' software suite, but in a vacuum, isn't that also a security leak? Knowing about things like Okta or like widespread technologies, not really. I mean, just having that information, and I think that's what you're talking about. Let me know if that's not right. But having that information in general is just going to show that you understand these widely used pieces of software, right? That's really what you're going for. And if you, sometimes you'll sign NDAs going into interviews, right? So sometimes there are a little bit more open dialogues than you would have otherwise. But even if you as the candidate can talk about something that you read or that you learned about, they don't have to say, hey, I know about that too because we use that. They don't have to say that, right? They can ask questions on it. They don't have to even disclose that they use it. But the fact that you said that you know about it shows them that you know about stuff that they have, and that could be beneficial. Back to the article here. The Department of Homeland Security announced a new artificial intelligence safety and security board designed to guide the usage of AI within U.S. critical infrastructure. And real quick here too, if you're tuning in and you're just joining the stream, we are having an after show after this episode. So we will have a brief after show after the content. So if you have questions that you want to get answered or hang out for a little bit, then make sure to stick around for after the content. So back to the article here. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said on a media call Friday that the board will advise the department on how to best govern the ways AI is deployed across the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, from defense to energy, transportation, to information technology, financial services, to food and agriculture, and so much more. AI can be an extraordinarily powerful force to improve the efficiency and quality of the services that critical infrastructure provides. At the same time, we recognize the tremendously debilitating impact its errant can have, Mayorkas told reporters. The board is tasked with creating, and this is in quotes, practical recommendations, guidelines, and best practices for responsible AI use and defense against the technology, but Mayorkas was tight-lipped about the tangible ways DHS is both defending critical infrastructure against AI or using AI to protect it, saying the department plans to make announcements in the future more fully explaining the board's goals. And then also Mayorkas mentioned the benefits and downsides of AI on the press call, noting that DHS has used AI before. And there's a little bit more in there about the article. So artificial intelligence, right? We know that it's on the rise. We know more and more companies are starting to use it. We know that governments are starting to use it more. And we know the major players are companies like Amazon and Microsoft and NVIDIA and IBM and all these like major companies that are making products or services that will help kind of further that agenda of artificial intelligence. And honestly, this stuff is going to go pretty fast, I think, right? We've already seen it kind of escalate pretty quickly as far as its first kind of initial introduction and the adoption rate kind of skyrocketing. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch this over the next several years, right? Like, I don't think tomorrow this is going to all of a sudden replace a bunch of jobs. In cybersecurity, I think it's going to be hard to replace a bunch of jobs with this. But certainly, I do think long-term artificial intelligence is going to shake some things up, right? We're going to see some differences, some evolutions and developments in this space of how we can use it. And certainly one of the questions still is the accuracy of the data and what it's the learning model that it's using and how it's processing all that data and all of those kinds of things. Because if you're going to use the data for decision making, you need it to be accurate, right? Like, you don't want it to be just kind of some random data that somebody fed it, and then it spit it back out to you, and then all of a sudden you're using this bad data, right? So that's a bad time. But yeah, this will be interesting to continue to watch for sure. Kyle says, I would love to see news channels take more care to differentiate ML and GPT when they post reports and just say AI. AI is easier. It's a buzzword, right? And just keep on using the buzzwords. That's the news. That's how it goes. Kaiser's website tracking tools may have compromised data on 13 million customers. This is another big article that's been talked about a lot today. The healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente is notifying more than 13 million customers that their personal information may have been shared with third-party vendors. In an April 12th notice to the Department of Health and Human Services, first reported by TechCrunch, the company said the information may include IP addresses, names, information that could indicate a member or patient was signed into a Kaiser Permanente account or service, information showing how a member or patient interacted with and navigated through the website and mobile applications, and search terms used in the health encyclopedia. It could certainly be dangerous, right? It does not include financial information or social security numbers, they said. The potential breach occurred through an unnamed online technologies, likely tracking software, installed on Kaiser websites and mobile applications, which the company says have since been removed. It also says information is protected, they wrote, even if the individual, and this is a quote, even if the individual does not have an existing relationship with the regulated entity, and even if the identifiable health information, such as IP addresses or geographic location, does not include specific treatment or billing information like dates and types of healthcare services. So one thing with healthcare information is, at least here in the United States, it is very protected kind of information, right? Like, it is considered sensitive information. There are specific regulations around it. So there's HIPAA, for instance. That is a very common compliance regulation or standard that you would go after or try to comply with if you're going to process that kind of information. Certain requirements as far as like what you can process, who you can share it with, how you can share it, how you have to protect it, right? Like all of those kinds of things. And then what happens if you're breached, and it's a whole thing, right? Like, it is literally a whole standard that you have to comply with. But we are seeing continuously that these healthcare companies, insurance providers, things like that, are in the crosshairs of attackers, right? We've seen a few instances lately of different attacks with several companies, and that's not really going anywhere, right? It's one of these things where sometimes attacks come in waves, right? They attack certain industries or certain kinds of companies, and then they do whatever they're going to do, and then they kind of move on, right? Or those groups just kind of disband, or I guess they get tracked down and they get hauled off to jail, right? So there's that too. But yeah, I mean, this is not really going away. This is unfortunate if you are part of this, right? Because certainly some of this data, like search history and some of the other information that was mentioned in here, that could be revealing to certain things about you, right? Like if you're searching for a certain kind of disease on Kaiser's website or their health encyclopedia, it's not unreasonable to be able to assume that you have something, or you are very interested in a certain kind of health thing, right? So always interesting with healthcare, but yeah, definitely not going away. Let's see here. All right. And Kyle says, who enforces the standards which are implemented onto healthcare providers' infrastructure? Definitely HIPAA. HIPAA is a huge one, right? There are several here in the United States, and I'm sure there's others around the world, but there are definitely requirements around, your infrastructure, how it's set up, what kind of security controls that you have in place. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do. But if you're looking to get more educated about that or learn more about that, I would start with HIPAA and just getting familiar with that requirement, with that compliance standard. And that will give you a lot of information as far as probably more than you're looking for if you don't work in that space. But that'll give you a lot more information as far as how HIPAA comes into play. A lot of these compliance standards, honestly, are very similar, right? With HIPAA, one of the major things is there's contractual requirements that have to be agreed upon between, for instance, covered entities and business associates. And I'm not going to dive all into that right now for this, but that's a huge difference between HIPAA and something like SOC 2 or ISO 27001, where that contractual requirement does not exist, right? Like there's no, in ISO 27001, there's no control that says you have to have a contract for like PII data or something like that, right? Like that just doesn't exist. In HIPAA, it does exist. So, but definitely start with HIPAA and just start reading through that requirement, through that standard, and that will start to kind of give you more insight and kind of open your eyes to those different requirements for sure. So with that being said, that is the last article for today's episode for Cyber Threat Intel. Again, this is episode number 25. This is Monday, April 29th, 2024. I'm your host, John Good, and this is Cyber Threat Intel. I want to thank you for joining if you were joining the live stream. If you're listening or after the fact or watching the replay, either way, glad that you stopped by, glad that you were able to consume the content, and hopefully you enjoyed it and keep coming back to get future episodes. As a reminder, we talked about if you have professional certifications and you're trying to maintain those, make sure that you claim half a CPE for every episode that you watch or that you tune into with your certification provider, your CISSP or your Security Plus or whatever it is, right? Make sure that you put in the chat your full name that you have related to your certification, right? Because you want, and take a screenshot and upload that as evidence because you want to make sure that you do get credit for this stuff. And we don't know ever if employers will, or if certification providers will really crack down on you, right? And make sure that you're really doing it. But if you put your name in the chat is on the screen, so you'll be able to screenshot that and show that is your registration that you were here. So make sure that you do that. Half a CPE every episode, so 2 CPEs a week, which is great, and it's free, right? So that's perfect for you. If you remember, we're available on all kinds of different platforms. So if you go to cyberthreatintel.com, again, cyberthreatintel.com, you'll be able to see all the platforms that we're on. We're on all the popular podcasting platforms. We're also on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on X or Twitter, and Facebook, all under John Good Cyber. So John Good Cyber, you'll be able to find us and see it all there. Or on podcast platforms, search for Cyber Threat Intel. Again, Cyber Threat Intel, and you'll find us. We'll pop right up. Also, you can get the article feed on cyberthreatintel.com. So if you want to see the articles or see other articles that we've put in there that weren't covered in the episodes, do that as well. And like I said, we are going to have an after show for this one. So we'll hang around for a few minutes after the fact. So if you want to hang around and ask questions or just hang out, then we can definitely do that. But if not, that's going to be it for this episode, and I will see you in the next one. I'll see you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. There's so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. glad to see people stuck around. People want to ask questions or just hang out. Again, we can do any of that stuff. So glad that you enjoy the content, though. Just rearranging my screens just like always. Sleet says, great stream. Thank you as always. Absolutely. Glad to do it. Glad to discuss this stuff and really hop in these streams and talk about it. Okay, so I know we're just getting the after show, but I have a serious question about the healthcare system. Why is it so hard to find adequate people to work in healthcare cybersecurity? I mean, it's no different than regular cybersecurity, right? Like, it's all the same kind of people, so there's no real difference. I mean, every industry has unique things about it and things that you have to understand. Right, so these are kind of, special things about that particular industry. Something like healthcare is going to have a little bit more specifics as far as maybe some of the gear or appliances and things that they use, right? But beyond that, the job itself is still the same job. Now, one thing that you will see in healthcare organizations, right, is a lot of times you have doctors that are running the show, right? So instead of like business leaders, it's kind of a difference with healthcare and hospitals and things like that. So that is a difference. Also, a lot of the hardware and appliances and things like that are used in hospitals aren't always built with a lot of security. Sometimes you'll have legacy devices or certain kinds of things in hospitals that are just built differently, right? Like, you can't expect that every single piece of equipment that you have in a hospital is going to be extremely secure or have all the security that it needs in order to operate, right? That's just part of it. And a lot of this stuff tends to have to connect to the network or something too, right? Depending on what it is. And so there's just different issues with that, right? Like, it's just how it is. But the industry itself is no real different, right? So, good question though. Let's see here. Let's throw this up here. So, do you have to major in cybersecurity or software engineer to become a software security engineer? I'm really interested in coding and want to get into cybersecurity. So, you do not, right? That's the first kind of answer for that. But there's all kinds of pros and cons to getting a degree and going that path, right? Say in tech in general, a degree is not necessarily a mandatory requirement, and especially the specific field is not necessarily a specific requirement. Certainly, if you have a degree in something like computer science or software engineering or something along those lines, right, like software development, that will help you as far as at least having a good head start and understanding a lot of the theory around software development and those kinds of practices. Software security itself means that you have a very good understanding of development, and typically the people that are good at that are the people that have that software background that want to go onto the security side of things or are more interested with the security aspect of things, right? So that's how I always think of it, and I think that you should think of that too, because those are the people that are going to be the best for that kind of role, right? Having somebody in a software security engineer role that is not a software person is not a good idea. And any organization that does that is putting themselves at a huge risk. So you don't want to be that person in that situation either, because you can cause a lot of problems because you're, supposed to be reviewing software or something and you sign off on it and it has a bunch of bugs or something, right? So yeah, you don't have to necessarily study or major in either of those, but it can help. The biggest thing is that you understand software, right? You understand development and how all of that stuff works, common security vulnerabilities. If you're dealing with things like web applications, you need to look at things like OWASP and be really familiar with those common findings, right? Because that is going to be a huge part of that job in identifying those issues. But then you also need to know how to identify those issues, right? Not just those vulnerabilities. So generally in private versus public, wouldn't the pay and budget make a big difference in security? I'm not sure if this is going back to your comment about the hospitals or healthcare, but there's a lot of companies that are in healthcare or in those kind of spaces that are not. Well, I guess are you talking about private versus public, as in like government, or like a public company is in I can go buy their stock on the stock market, right? Because I think that's an important distinction as far as answering your question. But generally, I mean, in healthcare, there's a decent amount of money in healthcare, right? Like, again, it's a specialized kind of area, and if you get really good at it, you can definitely get some good money. But pay is not the only thing that drives people, and pay is not the only reason why people go to certain industries, right? If that were the case, there would be industries that have a lot of security people right now that would not have a lot of people working in there, right? Because there are industries that just don't pay anywhere near some of these other industries. If everybody's trying to go to big tech or technology industries, SaaS companies, then everybody else would suffer. And obviously that's not the case, right? So, but that is not always the thing that drives what people are getting paid, right? There's so many differences between companies and industries and all kinds of stuff. So there's not really a blanket answer that we can compare that with, right? We'd have to look at individual companies. I mean, again, this comes down to the company or the environment, right? Certainly if a company has a higher budget, then they are more likely to pay more, but it just depends. Again, we'd have to look at the companies, the industries. There's a lot of factors that go into that, right? And especially in today's market, like right now, companies are being somewhat conservative, right? They're not in this like hyper growth, super aggressive kind of mindset because, things have been a little bit rough the last couple of years. You still see some layoffs and things like that are happening. And so it does kind of, we're not quite in that hyper growth mode as we were maybe like 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? One piece of advice you'd give to somebody new in IT and wanted to get into cyber or cloud: grab my free ebook. Start working through the roadmap. One of the things that people trying to get into this career field from zero, especially, so brand new, is that they're just trying to jump ahead and they have this all or nothing mindset, right? It's this, I'm going to get into cybersecurity or I'm not going to get anything, right? And if I don't get anything, I don't get into cybersecurity, I'm just going to keep waiting until I get into cybersecurity. Or I'm just going to keep studying, doing all these things. That's a huge mistake. And just start the roadmap in my ebook, start working through that, try to get some job in tech, cybersecurity, IT, help desk, something, and just keep working at it and try to figure out how to pivot into where you want to go. It's, sometimes people make it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, or more stressful than it needs to be, right? And that is not always the best strategy for sure. So. Do you see the demand for cybersecurity going up in the near future? And do you know how to code? I mean, the demand for cybersecurity is always going up. And people say cybersecurity, really it's information security that we need to look at, because information security is the entire spectrum, right? If you don't know like the difference between the definitions, go check out my video. I did a video comparing information security, cybersecurity, information assurance, like those terms and like what those actually mean. But information security is kind of the wide range of everything, and that encompasses or includes cybersecurity. And certainly that includes GRC and like all of these areas. And certainly the demand just continues to increase, right? There's more and more things to do. There's more and more things that we have to check, more and more compliance requirements. Like there's more of all of this stuff, and we can't even do it all right now, right? Like we are not even close to being saturated as far as a capability standpoint. We're really more restricted right now on our funding and ability to hire more people, right? Hire people that we can bring on, or hire people that are new and be able to train them or develop them, right? Those are completely different. I mean, they're related, but they are different issues or problems that exist, right? And it's a challenge, right? That is certainly a challenge. And do you know how to code? Yes, I do. So I'm not an expert coder by any means, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to work in this career field for a long time and not know how to at least do some basic coding or write some scripts or do some things. But a lot of what you will learn, right, is going to be out of necessity for your job or for the jobs that you've had. So that will drive a lot of the stuff that you do or the jobs that you want to get, right? Because all of that's everything that you do, skills, certifications, you know, all of that stuff is driven by the kind of jobs that you're in, that you want to be in, or you know, that you've had. So yeah, it's beneficial to know some coding or scripting. Scripting is really more beneficial for most people in this career field than programming. But certainly if you can learn a little bit, that would be good. So, all right. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Like I said, we don't have these after shows all the time, but we do try to have them after some of the episodes. So throughout the week, at least an episode a week, we try to have an after show just to get some questions in here and get answered. So sorry if I missed your question. Feel free to throw it in the comments if you want to, and then you'll get an answer that way. Or you can certainly go to one of the other live streams for this show, for the Cyber Threat Intel show, or anything else on my content, and you can ask the question again, and we can definitely dive into it that way. But with that being said, I want to thank everybody for hopping on, and just looking at this. Thanks everybody for hopping on. And I will see you in the next one. See you later.